Oh, let's kick it off. Seems like folks are getting here. Welcome to everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name's Liberty, and I'm a member of the Firestorm Collective. Tonight we're hosting Rattling the Cages, co-creators Eric King, Sara Falconer, and Josh Davidson. They're going to be talking about creating this really exciting oral history project, the importance of inside-outside collaboration, and how replicating oral histories is something that you can also do. So if you're tuning in for the first time, Firestorm is a 16-year-old radical bookstore owned and operated by a queer feminist collective in Southern Appalachia on the land of the Cherokee people. This is actually our first virtual event of the new year, but we're planning lots of great conversations for 2025. So definitely give us a follow on social media and bookmark our calendar. I'll drop a link in the chat in a minute. So as always, tonight we are using Zoom for better or for worse. And this is the Zoom webinar. So you're not on screen, but we still want to hear from you. There is a Q&A tool. Oh gosh, I didn't open the chat. There's also a chat here. I'm gonna look at me falling down on my job. Okay, there is now an open chat that everyone can use, and also a Q&A. But if you've got questions for the panelists, definitely want to recommend that you put those in the Q&A. It'll help us keep track of them. Stuff in the chat tends to get a little bit varied. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and give panel a quick introduction. First up, Eric King is a father, poet, author, and activist. In December 2023, he was released from the Supermax ADX prison after serving nearly 10 years as a political prisoner for an act of protest over the police murder of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. He was held in solitary confinement for years and met with violence by guards throughout his incarceration. Eric has published 3 zines, Battle Tested, Antifa in Prison, and Pacing in My Cell. We're gonna have to update this text because there's a lot more zines now. Spoiler, all of these talks have recently been turned into zines and they look great. Back to the script here. Eric was, his sentencing statement is also included in the book, Defiance, Anarchist Statements Before a Judge and Jury. And Eric now works as a paralegal for the Bread and Roses Legal Center. Thanks so much for being here, Eric.
Your pleasure.
All right. New on already. This series. We've got Sara Falconer, who is a communications strategist living in Hamilton, Ontario. She's been creating publications with prisoners since 2001, including the Certain Days, Freedom, and Political Prisoners calendar that we're going to be talking about tonight. Sara wrote the introduction to Rattling the Cages, which I hope you've read. Thanks for being here, Sara.
Thanks for having us. This is going to be great.
That last but not least, we've got Josh Davidson, who is an abolitionist, also a member of the Certain Days, Freedom for Political Prisoners calendar collective, and part of the Children's Art Project with political prisoner Oso Blanco. Josh edited Rattling the Cages, Oral Histories of North American Political Prisoners, on which this series is based. And he works in communications with the Zen Education Project, which promotes the teaching of radical people's history in classrooms and provides free lessons and resources for educators. Y'all, it's a huge pleasure to have you here. I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Eric. I know this is going to be a great conversation.
Thanks so much, Liberty.
Here we go. For everyone tuning in, I really appreciate it, and this is a really special one for me because it's a chance for me to interview and have a discussion with not only 2 people I admire, but 2 people I consider my dear friends and comrades. So I'm happy everyone is joining us. Let's get started. So this is all about political prisoner support. It's all about how we can build closer bonds, how we can make those walls smaller and bring people together better. So I'd like to first start with, you're both 2 prolific prisoner supporters. So if you could tell me how and why, like why you decided, why was this important to you? I think that would be really helpful for people to learn. Josh.
Sure. Thanks, Eric. I think for me, supporting political prisoners started around 2005 or 2006. I like to say I was politically astute enough to find myself in a radical bookstore. But that's about it. I mean, it was Red Emma's and books in Baltimore, Maryland. And it was a really, at the time, it was a really tiny basement bookstore. And I knocked over this book, and it was Love and Struggle by David Gilbert. And I sat there in the bookstore and I read it all day. And then I wrote to him the next day. And before you know it, we had like this great relationship where we were communicating back and forth. And I was making this,
How long did it take him to write back?
maybe a week, 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, which
Okay.
was, during the decade or so that we communicated while he was in prison, stayed pretty steady during that time.
Okay.
Um,
Keep going.
yeah, but yeah, Radical Bookstore. I started to write to David. I started to make that trek up to different New York State prisons to see him and to meet him. And every time I'd visit him and ask him what I could do to help, he would tell me to write someone else and to see what I could do, to support them. And every visit and every letter was like this lesson in movement history, and it really expanded my view and my understanding. And eventually that led to me joining the Certain Days Collective, and it led to me writing to different people and joining different freedom campaigns and trying to support them in any way I could, which whether it's a calendar or a book of oral histories.
You real quick, you said that you read his book and then decided like, I'm gonna write this guy. Why? Like, why'd you decide to write him instead of just putting money on his books or sending him a book or just thinking about him? Like, what made you decide to write him? Because that's a conscious decision. You have to put a lot of effort into that.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. There was something about David that really stuck out. I guess this like Ivy League white guy who had everything going for him, but put his entire life into struggle for Black
Much like
liberation
yourself.
and well, I don't know about that, but he put his entire life, out there to fight anti-imperialism, and that, yeah, it just really connected with me. And
Brilliant.
in reading the book, seeing the Weather Underground documentary, all of that just kind of led me to want to reach out to him.
Awesome. Sarah, if you're ready, same question.
Yeah, you know what? I love this question because I'm often on the soapbox trying to get people to write to prisoners. And so I love talking about how I came to it. Just to start, I want to say thanks to you, Eric, and to you, Josh, for your wonderful work on this book and for letting me be part of it. Like, I think that it's such an important project. And thanks, Firestorm, too, for hosting this cool series. I think for me, like part of what keeps me going as an anarchist and an activist is that connection that we have with people across movements, across locations around the world, across generations. And so when I started writing to prisoners around the year 2000, I saw some letters in a punk magazine called Maximum Rock and Roll, that many of you may know, from prisoners. And I was just very interested in the way that these humans were reaching out and that you could connect with them and that you could learn so much about people in a different walk of life. And I think that was the start of it for me. I came to know anarchist Black Cross soon after that. And they were not only helping support young activists who had been imprisoned, but also political prisoners who had been in for decades already. And so I started writing to some of those prisoners. And it was through that I really developed politically over the years, the conversations that I was having. You're learning about the civil rights movement firsthand from the people who helped lead it. To your point, Josh, to be able to talk to people about their experiences, what they learned, how they approach things, the mistakes they made, the things that they want to see happen in this world. I found it so powerful to be able to connect at that level and to have that history shape my own, political development. And so that's how I started to really think that I could play a small part in raising those voices, in sharing that experience with other people, in like getting people to either write to prisoners or to read their words or to support their campaigns. And, that's just what's kept me going all this time, is that connection that you're always making. You're always growing. I always learn something from the letters that I receive and that I send and the conversations that we're having.
So Sarah, just for you real quick, when you started, you're in Canada now. Were you in Canada then when you started?
Yes, yeah. So it's a kind of interesting like situation to be organizing in all of these years. In addition to the barriers that we have normally around reaching prisoners. I've also got the border and the time that it takes to reach people through mail, and the ability to see people in person isn't as frequent as it is in some other areas too. So yeah, I'm from Canada and did all this work in Canada.
Were there any people in like any political prisoners or Canadian prisoners that you supported, or were most of them down in the States?
The person that I connected with most closely is Anne Hansen. She was a member of the Vancouver Five. Just a tremendously inspirational person to me who went on to write some really beautiful books about her life and her experiences. And she's always raising the voices of women in Canada's brutal prisons. And so that connection helped me, I think, um, to bring that piece of it to home. And then locally, I work with supporting the Barton Prison Solidarity Project, which is the jail that's right in the middle of Hamilton. And so, we work with local prisoners too. But for the most part, it's been like correspondence to the States.
Okay, cool. So something I experienced, and it was really fucking annoying, was the prison putting barricades up between me and the people that supported me. And it made it really hard to maintain relationships with people, because for them on the outside, if you're not getting a letter for a year, you can forget or just move past someone, right? Thankfully, people like Josh and others stuck with me, but it made it hard. So I would like to know, what, if any, like difficulties you've all faced. What barriers have you faced? What obstacles have you faced when having to deal with this shit? And then also, how did you deal with them? How do you deal with them in regards to the interpersonal relationship with the prisoner, or in navigating the prison? Big Josh?
Yeah, good question. And I feel like the
You wrote it.
repression, what?
I said you wrote it. Just kidding. Go ahead.
Yeah. I feel like the prison repression and the restrictions have continued to get worse. Um, in terms of organizing, in terms of building relationships, it's become harder and harder. Um, we've found that getting certain days calendars into prisons is difficult. We found that more and more states and or federal governments are contracting out the letters and having, you mail the letter out to some third party place, they scan it, and then they send it in to someone. So that not only expands, the length of time it takes to communicate with someone, but those letters oftentimes, if there's any color involved, then it's not there. Sometimes they only scan the front page instead of the back page as well, so you only get half of the letter. So it's very restrictive and very discouraging for people. Even now, I write with Sinachli, one of the political prisoners and members of the Certain Days Collective, and the last 5 letters I've had returned to me just because there's like something, they say there's something wrong. I don't know. The address I use is the same thing that's on the VOP website, but they'll find something. And I think that's generally the case, is that they'll, whether, well, yeah, I don't want to keep talking. Sarah, what do you think?
I was just going to agree. It's so arbitrary, honestly, from institution to institution, from place to place, from guard to guard. It's totally random when they feel like they want to play some of these games. In addition to there like being actual regulations that are really restrictive for prisoners, you kind of learn to make lots of copies of things, make sure that you're communicating that you are sending something in. Like, you learn to be a pest to people and say, there's nothing against the rules. Like, can you please send it? Can you tell me why you're not sending it? I sent so many of those letters or like those phone calls in my life, like just like bugging people about it. I think too, my experience is that like for a lot of prisoners, they just have like shockingly few resources. And that's a real barrier to communication, right? Like pens, paper, stamps, money for phone calls, like the basic ways that we can communicate with each other. Those are really restrictive. And I think that that's some of the things that we can do, with our privilege, being outside, is to help try and fill some of those gaps in terms of resources. Now, some of the prisoners that I've worked with in the States have that like core links, that kind of like rudimentary email system. It's not the full internet, which some people think, but it's like they have a little more access to be able to talk to us. There's nothing like that in Canada. And so that's why it's so important for us to use letters and to, try and use the resources we had to get their voices out.
How, this is for both of you. In your experiences, if you can remember, which one caused more problems, state prisons or federal prisons? Because Josh, you said Jeantley, I fucked his name up, god damn it. But like he's in Texas State. So I didn't know if like federal prisoners have more access or if state prisoners get shut down more. Just what do you guys think?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think some states are more restrictive than others. The BOP does, though, I think tend to hold the bar in terms of that, in terms of making things difficult and restrictive.
Mhm.
I've never
I think too,
visited a federal prison, but I've visited a few state prisons, and those tend to be pretty restrictive too in person.
mhm.
Josh
I
never
think
visited me. Oh,
you're too popular. You probably had.
go ahead.
um, I think I will say that I think time is another restriction. That's really hard when you're doing a project, and probably we'll talk about it more throughout this, is like the time it takes to get letters between us. Like I said already, it's harder because by the time it gets through international mail and then to the prisons, that can be weeks and even months if it sits in the mailroom for a long time too. And so if you're trying to work on a project with somebody, it can get really excruciating to wait for a word from them. If somebody is not well or needs help and you're trying to get an update on them, that like that barrier of time, I think is really something that is like you just have to be very mindful of. I don't even know if there's necessarily solutions so much as just like being prepared that you have to do things at a different pace. Like in our projects, I think one of the things that we do is we build trust between people. We're working alongside the prisoners that we're collaborating with. And so you can make decisions. You trust each other a bit. You don't necessarily see the second draft after you've sent us it. And if we have some edits, you might see it, you might not see it. Do we trust each other enough that like a minor edit is going to be okay with you? Like that's the type of thing, and I think that's true probably in people's personal support too.
That's interesting. So let's talk about the good times. I was very fortunate enough to have some really positive moments with supporters while I was inside, where people and I just connected and like good things could happen, and it just made your life feel so much better, because you really felt seen during those moments. So, what are some moments for you all to where it just came together? Like either it's a victory or a project done, or just like a good connection you developed, and why was that so important?
I don't mind going first on this one. I've been blessed to spend time on the outside with political prisoners who have been released, some that I was friends with before they went inside, some that I just got to know through letters and through visits with those shitty vending machines in the tiny little rooms, where we just kind of bond. And so to be on the outside with people is such a victory and takes so much work from so many people in our movements to make happen that like you have to celebrate that. One of my like fond memories is spending times with Seth Hayes when he was released. He
Oh,
was really, really well supported by the our friends in Buffalo who work at run Burning Books, the bookstore, speaking of awesome independent bookstores. And we got to spend time with him. We got to eat meals with him. We got to go for walks. Like to see his smile and like make jokes with him and like see the sun on his face, like that's a huge victory, right? And that is the type of thing that keeps you going. I think the other thing for me too is those are friends that we love seeing too that keep me going. I love spending time with Josh and with the other members of the Calendar Collective and like people that we can, whether it's like us sending a billion signal messages to each other or like taking road trips to hang out, or if we happen to live like relatively close together, the times that I've been able to organize with collective members that way, like we can have fun even during hard times. We can support each other. And to like do hard work with people that can make you smile and that you can goof around with a little bit, like that, like between those two things, like the big things, the mega victories, and then the day-to-day, just like being friends with people that you do this work with.
how long did you write Seth before he was released?
He was one of the first people I wrote to, so
Oh,
that would have been like in maybe like 2001. And so
why?
off
Why
and on.
was he one of the ones? Like, what about him made you want to reach out to him?
Well, because he was one of the calendar collective editors on the inside at that time. And I was living in Montreal where the Calendar Collective was based. And so we were actually able to visit him in upstate New York. We like had some in-person visits. We had lots of letters, and we were often coordinating things. He wasn't somebody who like edited every single article or like, you know, was like deeply involved in like that piece of the process, but he had vision for the calendar. He had so much energy for it. And so that's how we got to be friends over the years.
I did not know that certain days used to be based in Montreal, or maybe still is.
It was
We'll get to
started in
that, but
Montreal. Yeah, it was
huh.
people in Montreal who had been visiting Herman Bell. And it was Herman Bell's genius idea. He to this day will tell anybody that they are a square, and that's his phrase that I love. You're an absolute square if you don't have a copy of the calendar on your wall. And so this was his idea to like you know, have something that would be on people's walls every single day with the words of prisoners, with important dates from our movement history. And yeah, it was originally a collective in Montreal. Over the years, it's expanded to New York, Baltimore, Toronto, Hamilton, you know, so many awesome people working on the collective and doing such important work. It's a lot of work, but it's a labor of love, and you know, that legacy from the little project that started in Montreal.
So Josh had told me that he started it out of his basement in Maryland. So I guess that's not true. Um, whatever, I guess. Josh, tell me about some of the victories you've had, both big and small, to where you just knew like what I'm doing is a valuable thing and I'm happy to be doing it.
Well, I've been involved in the Certain Days calendar for about 7 or 8 years, and every year when we create something new and something beautiful that we can send out to people inside and out, you know, it's a victory, and it's a really beautiful victory to be a part of creating something like that. So that's one. But like Sara was saying, I think seeing successful freedom campaigns is, you know, that's always the main goal, is to get people out of prisons. And I feel like I was really fortunate to come in at a time when there were a lot of people being released, especially in New York. Um, Sara mentioned Seth Hayes, and also Herman Bell and David Gilbert and Julio Montequim and others before them, like Sekou Odinga. So seeing those people come home after decades and decades is just so encouraging and so rewarding. And then being able to like take that relationship that you created in spite of all that repression and then build from that outside, once they're outside, I think that's really something special and something beautiful to be a part of.
What have you ever gone to visit someone and got turned away?
And actually, years ago, I went all the way to Texas. I was traveling for like general reasons, but I went all the way to see him at an institution that was really close to Waco at the time. And they decided that they hadn't had time to process the papers that I sent, like, you know, 3 months in advance, that sort of thing. And so it was like 100 degrees standing in the parking lot, just like finding out that I wasn't gonna get to see him. And like, it was not amazing. I've subsequently had an amazing visit with him in person and got to spend time through the glass. Like, as most people may know, he has been in solitary confinement for basically since I started doing this work. I think when he first got put into solitary, we thought he would be in for a few months, maybe. And now it's been
Sounds
over
good.
20 years. So yeah, we had a wonderful visit, but that first time was like one of the more low and frustrating points of my life, because you're so powerless, and it just like shows, you know, everything that they can take from us so arbitrarily too.
Yeah.
Josh, what about you? Have you ever been turned away?
Once I was visiting Julio Montequim. He was at Attica in upstate New York, and turns out they put him in the hole for teaching a Black history course and talking
Do
about
that.
the Panthers.
Mm.
So yeah, I wasn't able to see him, and it was not a great place to be.
No, it is not. So I want to ask a flip side to that question too, because I think something that happens to a lot of people that do prison support that I've heard is that something will happen and it'll derail them. And they'll stop writing, they'll stop sending books, they'll stop fundraising. They'll just lose momentum and support. So has there ever been times when you were supporting anyone that you were just like, fuck this, like, god damn, it's not worth it right now? Or where you wanted to stop, where like there were just bad times?
I mean, if you do it for this long, I think you're going to go through ebbs and flows in your life and in your energy that you have for it. If anything, over the years, I've been like kind of bad at recognizing my own capacity to do things and like saying yes to too many things.
Mm.
And so then I would like miss deadlines or like not follow through on things that I said I was going to do. And that would be really paralyzing to me, as it is to many of us, you know. And now just like that, I've had more years to kind of get to know that part of myself and to really recognize how much people are counting on us when you say you're going to do something. I think I'm better at like not overcommitting and like being real when I need to take a bit of a break. You know, like I can't write every week or whatever it is. Like it's been a long time since I could like furiously write tons of letters every week. And there's a time that I did. But I think that that was like part of growing. And this is the thing, you are like building a relationship, you're friends with people. And so if you can be honest with them and say, I'm going through a rough time. I had people like Marilyn Buck support me more than I think I was ever able to support her. You know, like she was just such a wonderful mentor to me and such a wonderful inspiration. And like, yes, I was doing things to like get her writings out and things like that, but I was getting advice from her because I was a young person and I was like, man, I am falling apart here. And she would give me such cool advice, you know, like, so this is like you're building relationships with like people who have so much to give back, right?
So I want to just backtrack real quick. You
Mm.
wrote and had a relationship with Marilyn?
Yeah, I mean, like we weren't like super close, but like we wrote for a number of years. She actually helped me with like some of my thesis research, like so that was 2003, 2004 years ago. And yeah, she was just like a wonderful person, and I wish I had had more of a chance to know her when she was on the outside, but you know, she was quite sick when she was released, so we didn't have that chance.
Do you still have those letters?
I do. I have like a kind of ridiculous like quantity of letters from over the years. So every now and then I look at the pile, which is completely unorganized, is literally just boxes of letters where I was like, okay, those are the letters. And then I would move to another place. So I don't know. There's some gems in there, I think.
I I am so fascinated by this. We might touch back on this also. We might circle back. Um, Josh, what were some of your hard moments or times where you're like, this fucking sucks?
You're muted, Josh.
Sorry about
This wasn't me this time.
that. I think it's related to what Sara was saying about knowing your capacity and knowing what you can handle and what you can, what you can work on at a particular time. These are people that are locked in a cage for, sometimes 23 hours a day. And they can use all the support that they can get, but they also, I think it's fair to say everyone in there needs to know your level of commitment and your level of involvement. And if it's something you can't commit to, then I think being honest about that is very important. I can't think of like particular obstacles that have prevented me from doing the work. I always try to like
You can't think of any?
move it forward, like Eric, when you were on a mail ban, there was like a year and a half where we couldn't communicate together, and that was hard. But I took that opportunity to reach out to another political prisoner that you and I had talked about quite often, Oso Blanco, who's an indigenous um, political prisoner serving time for robbing banks and sending all the proceeds to the Zapatistas. And out of that, we've built like this great relationship, and I've been able to help him create these greeting cards, these really beautiful greeting cards that are available at Burning Books. And it's by indigenous artists in prison. And we sell the greeting cards and we send all the money down to the Zapatistas. So it's a way of him like continuing his work, in spite of the prison bars and the repression. So no, I think that, and I know I'm fortunate in saying that. Plenty of people have faced that and have, stopped working because of it. But yeah, I don't know if that answers.
Why did you start writing me?
Why did I start writing to you?
Yeah.
A former political prisoner, Daniel McGowan. He said that he thought that you and I would get along.
Never heard of him.
And he was right. We built this great relationship, and it's not the case with all of them. I think you and I were fortunate, and he was right that we do have a lot in common. And the letters that you and I shared were like, I think intimate is the wrong word, but we were very honest with each other and like very upfront about, what we were just about ourselves and our lives. And I think that I've said this in other talks we've done, but like whatever you put into it is what you'll get out. whatever you put into building a relationship with someone behind bars is what he'll, hopefully they'll put into it as well. So
And I think that's not to like scare people away either. Like from if you are like, I don't have a lot of capacity right now. I'm going to write a letter of solidarity because I heard this person got transferred or they're in the hole or whatever it is. And you're like, I'm going to write to this person. It is totally fine to say, like, I'm thinking of you. Here's like, sending some love from snowy ass Canada. And I don't have a lot of capacity to write right now, but like, let me know if you need anything and like, we can stay in touch, whatever it is. Like it does, like, not everybody has to like completely dive in and make it their second full-time job. And then some, like, Josh and others have. And so I think there's like, it's more that being realistic, being honest, like in daily life, I think you can overcommit and say, yeah, I want to go to that party when you totally don't want to. This is like, you have to have a little bit more foresight about it because people are really counting on you. That's the main thing. Is like, just if you say you're going to do something, do it, or like make it very clear, if something changes.
For those that don't know, Josh started writing me while I was in the SHU at Leavenworth. I had just got attacked by the lieutenant, and they were waiting to see if they were going to prosecute me or not. And I got Josh's letter shortly before my first phone ban happened. And having that person where I could write and ask for things specifically, and then they would send that shit in, made a really big difference. Because a lot of people would overcommit. They would do the thing where they say, like, if you need anything, you let me know. And then I'd ask to write lyrics to a song and I'd never hear from them again. So having someone
No, important question. Was it a Taylor Swift song?
That's not important. That's not relevant.
it was full Taylor Swift album.
Josh would send me full Taylor's. But so like that shit made a big difference for me because I'd say one out of every 10 actually follows through with what they say they're going to do. And maybe that's the same in the free world too, but inside having that one made a really big difference. Also when people would do what you just did or what you said, Sarah, when folks would tell me ahead of time, I can't write back. I'm just sending my love. That would help me a lot because then you don't have unrealistic expectations. Because it hurts when you think that you have a bond with someone and then they essentially ghost you.
Mm-hmm.
And that sucks. Like that hurts really bad. So I like that you said that, like setting out like this is what I have. I think that honesty goes a long way. Have you two ever been ghosted by a prisoner where they just like quit writing you or got mad at you?
There's people that I like didn't stay in touch with, they were getting support from other people and we just didn't click. Like the way you talk about, like there's people that I think in the beginning, because I wrote to quite a few people, over time, I just kind of narrowed into the people that I really connected with or that like really particularly like wanted to work on projects or needed something. There wasn't anything where I was just like, wow, I'm never speaking to this person again or vice versa. I don't think you kind of, just drift a little bit. But even some of those folks, I would try and send them like, when you could still send holiday cards in. That was like one of my great joys, was like getting a whole bunch of people together and sending cards in around the holidays. Just a little bit of brightness, let them know that you're thinking of them. And so like usually like once a year, I would still send something to people, but you can still send a black and white ballpoint pen, letter with no drawings to most institutions. So
at your
it's a little
most, how many
different.
people were you writing at a time? At your peak, your pinnacle?
I mean, for those things, like I would have taken the New York ABC list, which is like comprehensive and always up to date. At certain times, it had like 75 people on it. I would have written something to all those folks, not writing something to all of them saying like, hey, let's be pen pals every day. But like, just like that, how are you doing kind of thing.
What about actual pen pals?
Oh, I don't know. At any given time for some of these projects like that I've worked on, whether like Prison Radio, which I worked on for a while in Montreal, or like for Struggle Mag, which is a zine that I worked on, or the calendar, or various other projects in between. At like any given time, I would be probably working pretty closely with like 6 or 10 different people, with like a few that I was like closer with. So I don't know, it comes and goes. Josh, how is it for you? Like Josh is a workhorse around this
Josh
stuff too. I know he
actively
writes to a
writes
lot of
28 people right now.
Oh my
No, I
gosh.
don't know.
Give me a
I don't
list
know
of who he
the
writes. Tell me I'm wrong.
I don't know. I don't know the list. And that's kind of the fascinating thing about it is that, if you're lucky, people get out of prison and it creates this whole new level of communicating and relationship building that is really fascinating a lot of times, and heartbreaking too when you see someone that hasn't seen technology in 40 years, um, or something like that. But also being a part of the calendar, being a part of creating Rattling the Cages, has built has meant me writing to and communicating with a lot of different prisoners that I didn't communicate with before. And sometimes it leads to like really long lasting, and impactful and like, letters that are several pages long. Other times it's just, a paragraph here or two every few months to check in on someone, to not only let them know that you're thinking about them and that you're there if you need anything, but also to let the guards know that there are people out there looking after them and like, keeping an eye on them. But yeah, it changes. There's no definitive number. Sometimes I'll get a letter back from someone I haven't written to in 2 or 3 years, and that's also fascinating.
So something that like really touched me in our friendship was I was at Inglewood facing this is after I'd been prosecuted. Yeah, they were charging me. I'd been charged. And I told you about someone named Thomas Smith, Mad Dog, who was in ADX. And I asked you, like, could you just say hi to him? Like, will you just send this dude respect? And you did it. Um, Even though he wasn't a political prisoner, you still reached out to this complete stranger just to send solidarity. And that really meant a lot to me. Do you write other social prisoners? Was that a
Yeah.
one-off?
No, no, for sure. I mean, the last panel we did with Bori and Farhan, those were two people that I met through the calendar who were not necessarily, labeled political prisoners, but they did decades behind bars facing state repression. And there's others like that. There's political prisoners I write to who have made like lifelong friendships with people inside, like you and Smiles.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff like that where I've written to people who knew people inside, friends of friends like that. Um, or also just people I know that went to prison for non-political reasons. I'll admit that I'm more likely to write to someone who's in for a political act or political cause of some sort. And maybe that's selfish because I feel like I can learn from them or also help them, process what they're going through. Um, yeah, but no, I don't restrict it one way or the other.
Sarah, have you spent time, like, have you ever developed relationships with social prisoners? Or because of
Yeah,
your
when
projects, it was mostly political?
when For Struggle Mag was happening, it was
Will you tell people
started
what
as
First
kind of
Struggle
a
Mag was?
oh yeah. So For Struggle Mag was a zine online and in print that we produced for I think 20 issues, um, collecting writings from political prisoners and from social prisoners on kind of the issues of the day. And so it wasn't necessarily about, we had case updates. That was important. Thank you, Josh.
Josh was a relic.
We had case updates, which was great. But we also had like, we were talking about war. We were talking about feminism. We had a whole issue on hip hop, which was amazing because older prisoners, including Mumia, wrote in and said, you know what? I had sort of been like disregarding hip hop because I didn't think it was like very conscious. And, you have like made some interesting points here. And so the younger prisoners who had been writing to the magazine were just overjoyed. And there was just such an opportunity to build some of those bridges to like make that connection for people who like maybe only heard from political prisoners but hadn't seen those other writings. And so um, the issues are still online if people are interested. That's forstrugglemag.org. And I think through that, I built some really great relationships with people that were like regular contributors or who just wrote something that I thought was amazing and I would write back. But at a certain point, I was also getting maybe like 50 or 100 letters, like submissions a month. And that was like a lot. And it was very, very hard to keep going. So I had some really great people who worked on it over the years. It was not just me as like an outside collective, but it was really hard to keep going because the sheer volume, once the word started getting out, people were so into it. So that type of a project I think could work really well still. Harder and harder to get information in and out, as Josh mentioned earlier, though.
I can say that two things. One, I don't think there is a Rattling the Cages without For Struggle Mag. That I got 3 issues mailed into me, and it just blew me the fuck away. And one of the saddest things that happened when I was getting transferred, the guards just threw them away. One of them ripped one of them in half. That was during a search. And it was like these things felt like priceless relics, like time capsules of history. And to see them get destroyed by these pig sons of bitches, it hurt. It hurt bad.
I've got some back issues that I can probably make in your direction. But the other thing that I loved about that was, yes, they got censored. Yes, they got destroyed. That happened all the time. I would get dozens sent back to me. But in the midst of that, it was also getting distributed amongst prisoners, like that would share it with each other. And so we would get letters from people that not just they weren't on the mailing list, the institution they were at was never on our mailing list. And so they would bring it with them when they moved or however they're getting stuff around. Tremendously resourceful. It just really blew my mind, like the way that the people were able to share that with each other. And I couldn't even estimate how many copies, like how many times each copy got read. So I think that was very powerful.
I'd say mine, because I would pass them around. Like people want to read that shit. Not that shit. People want to read that sort of stuff. Like they're very invested, and so yeah, it was those things were blessings. So let's talk about Rattling the Cage, or not Rattling. Let's talk about Certain Days. Certain Days has been around approximately 25 years. That's what my notes say.
This is the 25th edition, yeah.
So let's start with you, Sarah. Tell me about how you got started and why you got started. And then Josh, I would like to hear from you the same stuff, like how and why.
Yeah, so
tell a brief overview of what Certain Days is also.
Josh, I'm going to leave the overview with you because you are so good at it, and then I can talk about how I got started in Montreal on it.
Josh,
Sure.
give us the overview.
Yeah, so the Certain Days calendar, Certain Days Freedom for Political Prisoners calendar was started in 2001. It was the idea of former political prisoners Herman Bell, Seth Hayes, and David Gilbert, who were all involved in.
Seth was in the opening stages like that?
Yeah, those 3.
All 3 of them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, they were all involved in the Black liberation struggle, imprisoned in New York State, and they along with organizers and friends on the outside, mainly in Montreal and also I think in upstate New York, worked to put this calendar out, and it's really amazing. There's 25 of them out now. It started as an educational project and as a fundraiser to teach people about political prisoners and about our movements and the people that struggle for them, and also as a way to raise money for those people that are suffering inside. And over the years, I think it's gone from raising a few hundred each year to several tens of thousands of dollars every year that we're able to distribute to a wide variety of different causes. People on the front lines, people fighting to get out of prison, you name it. And each calendar has 12 pieces of art and 12 essays, usually by prisoners or their supporters on the outside. And instead of dates you'd find in a regular calendar, this calendar is full of radical movement dates, so that you're reminded every day of the year of what people have gone through and how the struggle continues every day.
So quick question. You said it was started by David, Herman, and Seth, R.I.P. Seth. How did they coordinate together to have this idea together? Or were they in the same prison? How did those 3 together formulate this idea?
Well, so I can talk a little bit about that, and I will try and be as accurate as I can. I moved to Montreal in 2001, which was an amazing time to be an anarchist in Montreal. There were so many great groups, so much awesome organizing, just this energy, and the Q Perg that we organized out of was just a real place that you could meet people that were working on cool projects. And I met the people who had been working on the calendar before I moved there. Just a totally awesome collective of people who had been visiting Herman, David, and Seth, and others in upstate New York, because Montreal is a reasonable driving distance to some of those prisons. And so I think it was Herman's idea originally, if I remember correctly. And then they facilitated some of this planning on the outside so that everybody could contribute their ideas to it. make sure that they were soliciting articles from like a really wide variety of political prisoners and artists on the inside and outside and that sort of thing. And it just built from there. They had, as three individuals, such amazing respect, as like leaders and educators and writers and like voices in the political prisoner movement, and had made such wonderful connections with people in Montreal, in New York, and elsewhere, that they had a really great foundation to start that from. So I wanted to be part of it. I started just distributing. I was just like, this thing is amazing. And I would like just hustle getting it out to like bookstores or dropping off mail or whatever it was. And then it wasn't long before I like weaseled into the collective. So I am fuzzy on the origin story. Sometimes people ask me what the name Certain Days is from, and I'm like, I don't even have like a really clear backstory for that. I do have a good sense that it's like about certain days being important, certain days coming, the future that we are building together. There's like multiple layers to it, but I think probably Herman would have a better way of describing it. So just a tremendously important project. I love seeing it every single day. I like having prisoners like visions and voices in our day-to-day life, not just like siloed off into like a political prisoner support movement or whatever, but just like in our daily lives, in all of our organizing, in our like planning, in our thoughts. And so I think the calendar does such like an amazing job of that.
So to get, even just to make zines or whatever, like this stuff's not free. And I imagine to create a calendar like that's a lot of work. How did the early issues get financed? Like, how did that come to fruition to get those not only created, but then like mailed everywhere?
Expropriations.
I briefly mentioned the PIRGs, but so I don't, you may have similar models in the States here.
I doubt it.
Public Interest Research Group, PIRGs. It was the QPIRG because it was the Quebec PIRG. Mostly based out of universities, and they are a wonderful resource to activists, especially like students. And so there was a space there to do some of the planning, to do the actual like physical work and meetings and things like that. And they were tremendously supportive. We were a working group of the QPIRG for a number of years until we transitioned it to like our own project. Some of us were students, some weren't. I was a student at the time. So that was where it started. And then eventually, through much trial and error and like not being very good at numbers or accounting, like just like slowly started to make more sense out of it. And then certainly the current collective does such an amazing job of like making it something that is feasible. The folks at Burning Books have done an awesome job of taking on like doing some of like those tasks in the mail, across the States. That used to be, we would be sending mail from Canada into the States. You can imagine how expensive and like time consuming that was.
Right.
So that's been like just a wonderful partnership. But at the time it made sense because we were sending like, I don't know, hundreds of calendars, maybe a couple thousand, and now it's a lot more. So
one of the fun things I like doing with the calendar is I'll ask a prisoner their birthday. And then we'll just flip through like, oh, on this day, like prisoners killed 17 people and wherever. How did the first dates, why did those get decided? Or like, how do dates get added to it? Like what events qualify to be in the calendar?
I credit the early collective with like so much of the starting work on that. They must have had to do so much research to start those dates. They probably canvassed like, David, Herman, Seth, and like other people that they were in touch with to like make sure that important dates were included. But kind of like an organic process over the years. Sometimes people will write and say, hey, why isn't this date in there? And really it's not like intentional. It's just like we had to be reminded of it, or maybe we didn't know about a certain date or whatever. Some things kind of change over time too, in terms of like the significance, like certain dates that you would put in for the last like 5 years. They won't necessarily stay in for the next like 15 years, because for one thing, there's only so much space in those little boxes, right? And so it's a process that is constantly evolving. I don't know, Josh, like how the current decision making works around it, but it's like, to me, very very fluid and like definitely like a crowdsourced kind of thing over the years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Including the dates that we got wrong by mistake over the years. So
real quick, I looked up to see if there was anything going on today. This is a very slow week in radical history. Very
You know,
slow
it's
week
like
on the
everybody
vote.
else. It's like that weird dead area right after January. Like who's gonna do anything
Yeah.
other than like, January 1st, which is filled
January
with
1st and then
revolution.
January 20th. Yeah.
If anyone's wondering, on Thursday, that was the anniversary of a San Quentin prison strike. So
Yeah. So the dates do change and it is very fluid. Sometimes we'll get an email from someone saying like such and such got out this day, or sometimes, this date is wrong. We just noticed this week that we have a Peltier date that's I think in June and July, and it's supposed to just be in July. So, there are mistakes. Kudos to people who find them and point them out. I was told in the creation of while making Rattling the Cages, I interviewed Ed Mead and Mark Cook together, both of the George Jackson Brigade. Rest in peace to Ed. Um, Ed told me that he provided the original Certain Days Collective with the dates that went in the calendar.
Oh, that's so
I don't,
cool. I
yeah, I
didn't
have
even
no
know
idea
that.
if that's true.
that I hope it's not true. I would love that about Ed, that he just bullshitted that.
It could, yeah, I have no idea. And then recently I came across the 1982 calendar, which is kind of cool, and I'll share that in the chat that the John Brown Anti-Klan Committee made.
Oh, that's neat.
And I don't know if that's really a precursor to the Certain Days calendar, but it's pretty amazing how they did that.
So one of my proudest moments when I was first locked up was the first time I saw one of my writings in Certain Days. And then one of my saddest moments was the next year when it got rejected. Um, so how does the submission process work? Like, how does something get in, but something else has to sit in the corner? Like, what's that process like?
Well, so there's a call for submissions that goes out as early in the year as possible, to try and reach particularly prisoners because it's going to take them longer to get the information back to the collective. From there, and I keep saying I actually have stepped down into like a supporting role, but I think I know a little bit about just like the process from over the years. But so we would put all of the art and articles into a database where we can review them together. And so once the deadline has passed, we would review all those. In the meantime, the collective solicits particular ones that they're like, hey, the topic is I'm going to use like, the year that we were working on like Indigenous struggle. And we definitely had to reach out to like Indigenous political prisoners, certain like activists on both sides of the border that we wanted to make sure were included. So it's not just like everybody submits and then we pick some just from that. Some of it is like soliciting articles from organizations or from people that we really want to see represented too. And then it's yeah, it's quite a process. We used to do it in person, which was so wonderful. We would just sit down and like eat bagels and don't make fun of the way I say bagels. We would just hang out for like an entire weekend and look at all the art and articles and like plan it out. And over the years, because everybody is in all these different cities and different countries, it's more of like a virtual process about that. But I miss those days and it was so much fun. I think we try and recreate it, the fun with each other, but it's different than just like sitting in a room until we're sick of each other picking out things. So I don't know, Josh, like you've been in it more recently, like how has the process changed, or like how do you find it works with like the different submissions?
Yeah, I think overall the process has stayed like you said. We do get a lot of submissions from people in prison, but I feel like we do in the last few years we've gotten less. And I don't know if that's a matter of state repression, or
You say you've
people.
gotten less recently?
Yeah, I feel like we've gotten less submissions from people in prison. And I don't really know the reason behind that. I
Fire
think,
Ant has also suffered that fate, oddly.
yeah, and it could just be, guards not sharing the call out for submissions. It could be people sending us stuff and us not getting it. I'm not really sure. So it has sometimes required us reaching out to either people's support networks or organizations on the outside to get particular articles or artwork on a particular subject. But no, I don't think it's changed that much over the years. Sometimes we'll see like really amazing artwork at at book fairs or events we're at, and we'll, ask that artist to submit their stuff to the calendar, which has led to a lot of really great stuff, or inclusions. But yeah.
All right, sweet. So I want to segue now to something like, oh, go ahead.
Oh, just before we move away from calendar, I want to remind everybody that it's actually almost sold out. I have like a very small amount of copies in Hamilton here to do Canadian distro. Burning Books is sending out a whole bunch. Curse in Montreal does distro in Canada too, but everybody is running very low on copies. And so get some, don't be a square, certaindays.org if you want some. And, it's just awesome to see everybody's support of it, that it's doing that well this year for sure.
I really loved it when I would write Josh and I'd be like, so and so needs a calendar. Just some random ass dude, and like 3 days later or a week later, 20 days, whatever, like the calendar would show up. So not only would that prisoner get something great, but then I'd look like a hot shot for asking for it. So I used to love those moments.
That's the other thing too. People can support by if you already have your calendar, maybe you already bought 20. That's awesome. You can buy copies for prisoners for a discounted rate if you go to the website too. And you can either, if you have a prisoner that you correspond with, you can suggest their name and they'll receive a calendar, or just say, I would like to send 5 calendars to prisoners, and we'll pick people that are in need. People write to us all the time.
It's interesting that you said prisoners get a discount, because Josh used to charge me double.
Well, that's just for you.
Oh, no, I was paying
Special
30
Eric
bucks a
King rate.
calendar. My goodness. Even more to get my submissions approved. So I'm going to segue to Rattling the Cages. About 5 or 6 years ago, me and Josh were writing, and we had this idea to bring together the history of the lives of prisoners as opposed to the politics of prisoners. And that felt really instrumental to me, because we were losing people like Tom Manning, and I would never know what they actually felt, like what they experienced, what their joys or happinesses or sadnesses were like. And that hurt me, because I wanted to honor them as individual people along with revolutionaries. So I've got questions for you, Sarah. I'm going to start with Josh. Why did you say yes to that project? Like, why did you say, I'm willing to put in this goddamn work and find a way to develop this?
Yeah, great question.
Besides the glory and money.
Yes, well, obviously the glory and money.
For those wondering, we get half a cent each per book. So
no, it was just so compelling. It began with Eric and I reading a book. Again, a lot of good things in my life happened from just reading a book. And this one happened to be Say Nothing, which is about the IRA and the troubles in Northern Ireland, and particularly the Boston History Project, which was this campaign to record oral histories of people involved in the struggle in Northern Ireland. And that's where we got the idea to
north of Ireland.
North of Ireland, correct. Yes. And that's where we got the idea. And originally it was, we were thinking like creating a few zines of interviews with like political prisoners from the Black liberation struggle, particularly like Sekou Odinga, Mutulu Shakur,
Maroon.
Yeah, Russell Maroon Shoatz, so many people, and those are people that have passed away since we came up with this idea. But being in the Certain Days calendar collective, being someone who writes to a lot of people in prison, I did have access to a lot of people who wanted to share their stories, and it kind of mushroomed from there. It was like a handful of people that wanted to talk, and then they told their friends or comrades, and then they wanted to talk, and eventually we got 40 people to share their oral histories of life inside and how they maintain the struggle.
Did you face any resistance at first? Like, were people like, no, fuck this, and then later turned around, or was it all like yes or all no?
No, there were a lot of people that didn't want to be involved. Not as many as did, but yeah, there were a lot of people that didn't want to tell their story, or were in the process of writing their memoirs maybe, and didn't want to tell the same story twice. And then there's a handful of people who have seen the product and of what came out of that, and wish that they had been involved. But luckily we've been able to include some of those with these talks that we've been doing, which is just a way of continuing to raise the voices and amplify the struggles of people inside.
Who was the first person to say yes? bet it was David.
You.
Oh yeah.
No, that's a good question. Actually, for the most part, the order of people in the book are the order in which I got the responses back. So Donna Wilmot was probably one of the first people, but yeah, there were a whole bunch of people that were really interested in. And for me, I love being able to share this history and learn this history with people who don't know about it, but also just knowing that people
who do.
Yeah, people who have been involved in this for decades and decades and can read this book and still learn something is really moving for me.
You said Donna was one of the first, and for people who don't know, Donna's one of the people I love most on earth, and I hope we're gonna have them on the video soon. So Sara, me and you, like, we didn't really talk much. Like, I think there was mutual respect. I knew about you greatly from people I had lived with, from knowing your work with certain days, and then also reading your intro to the RAF book. Um, so I'd like to first start with one, how'd you get on the intro to the RAF book? And then two, what did you think when Josh brought this project to you? Because you were the only person I requested, like, by name, like, lock in Sara if we can get her. So how did that feel, and like what were your thoughts about the project? Starting with the RAF book, and then second question.
Yeah, I mean, like, what an honor to be invited to have some words in these super important and beautiful books. For the RAF one, one of the main people that was working on it was Carl from Chris Blebedeb that I mentioned previously in Montreal.
That's how you say it?
Yeah, well, he can tell me if I'm saying it wrong. But like, wonderful publisher of like totally amazing radical like books, scenes, and more. They're just like, speaking of moving to Montreal and like finding all of these wonderful resources, that was definitely a big piece of it. And then I had been involved in ABC for many years and just like interested in this work and doing lots of reading and thinking and talking about it. And so they reached out and asked if I wanted to write the introduction. And I was, again, just completely proud to be asked to do it. And also it's so much pressure. Not that the next book that I wrote the introduction for didn't have Angela Davis writing the preface, like no pressure at all there. It's like, please don't tell me that. She did such a beautiful job too. But yeah, so when it comes to any kind of project like this, I'm just like so pleased to be able to support it in some way. I do love writing. I have been a writer for many years, and to have that opportunity to just like reflect and to try to like share my ideas, and to try and get people excited about the thing they're about to read. That's something that I actually really love doing. And so, you know, what an accomplishment, Rattling the Cages. You're talking a little bit about like what a challenge it was to reach people, but like we just talked about how hard it is with like censorship and repression and time and the details of all these things. It was in the middle of COVID, on top of everything else. You know, the two of you and everybody that was supporting like did such an amazing job. And so when I found out that I could help at all, I helped, I think, a little bit with some of the article like editing, which is also my nerdy superpower. I love doing that when I can. But to be invited to do that introduction was just like a real honor and really exciting because it let me step back and kind of reflect on not only on all the amazing things that I'd had a sneak peek to like read in the book. I was feeling just so like emotional and like inspired by everything that I'd been reading, but also to think about my own development and like how that like oral history was such a big piece of it. So, you know, Josh and I have worked together on certain days for a long time, and he's such like a dear friend. It was fun to be able to support him on this other big project that was like such a passion of his for so long too.
What did you
And
think
just
of
to,
like, oh, go ahead.
yeah, I just want to add to that like part of what made this project so special for me was that we could include so many different people in it. You know, not just Sara writing such a beautiful introduction, but Amy Schwartz with a Certain Days calendar, and Pat Corkin at the Zen Education Project helped me do the editing for the book and like thinking through some of those things. Yeah, mad respect to them too. They did so much work on it. I had Leslie James Pickering at Burning Books and David Gilbert helping me with the glossary at the back. And there were just so many people that were involved in, you know, sometimes in really minute ways, but sometimes in really, powerful and important ways. So I think doing that, like working with people both outside and inside, just really made the project all the more special for me.
Considering how much the publishers decided not to help you, I am so happy that the community decided to lend that extra hand. Sarah, when you first heard about it, did you think it was going to come off? Like, did you think, oh, this is a great idea? Did you think this has already been done? Did you think why? Like, what did you think about the project itself?
Well, for one thing, I knew Josh was going to get it done because he just gets
Josh
shit
gets
done.
everything
So, and I think that you mentioned Tom Manning, and like we've lost so many important people in our movements over the years, like Marilyn Buck, Seth, Sekou Kambui, like so many people that I had been very close with. I was very close with Sekou Kambui before he passed, and that's another person that I was lucky to talk to after he was released. But to think that they have so much to give us in terms of sharing their stories, in terms of telling us about themselves as people, which was a really interesting dimension of this book. That's just such a gift. These oral histories are going to shape like generations to come. Ray Levisser and Tom Manning had worked on Hauling Up the Morning, another really beautiful book. I don't remember the year in that. It just absolutely transformative writings in it to read and to learn about all of the different people that are still very much a part of our movements and our history. And so I knew that the idea of an oral history was like so powerful. And I knew that we were kind of overdue for one. Like we are unfortunately losing people due to age, due to medical neglect by like the shit prison systems. And like what a gift to be able to share this with people.
Yeah. So when Josh talked about for those listening, he talked about how we were reading Say Nothing. And the thing that affected me the most about that was that the book touched on the trauma. It didn't just focus on the glory of being a fighter. It was, there are lasting impacts to this. And those lasting impacts don't get as much credit as the bravado. They don't get as much attention. And I was feeling so weak because I was feeling hurt and vulnerable. And I didn't see that my elders had felt that also. I only read about the power. And so I felt isolated. And so being able to see them like explain the things that like that it had a toll, that it hurt them, like that this is hard. It changed my life. Like I'm just so grateful that they shared that. And your time supporting, like this isn't about Rattling the Cages, but it just popped up. And both of your time supporting, have you had like many opportunities where people like were able to share like deep moments with you, like beyond the artificial, beyond the surface, like have people like open up about hurts or sadnesses or fears?
Yeah, I mean, I won't mention anybody by name
Oh no.
because, that's obviously part of the trust that we've built. But the prisoners that I've been closest with over the years, I feel like we really do know each other. I tell them when I am feeling down or like going through challenges or like, family illnesses or whatever it is, and all the joys too. And similarly, when they're in the space to share, some of them will really open up. Some people are more into like an intellectual discussion and will like say a little bit at the beginning or end about like how they're doing and like, really more interested in talking about the book they're reading or what's going on in the world. And there's so much going on in the world that they can, share insights on because, many of the prisoners that we worked with, for example, were passionate about Palestinian solidarity, right? Like they feel strongly what's happening now still too and have lots to talk to about that. But I think it's like any friendship, like these are friendships, like deep friendships. This is not like us doing charity work. We're not doing things on behalf of people. These are like our friends and our comrades that we're working alongside. So
Yeah.
hopefully we can be human with each other.
What'd you say, Sarah?
I was just saying, like, hopefully that means that we can be human with each other. It's not easy all this. I'm not good at sharing my feelings, so how can I ask them to?
Yeah, I'm not either. But I do, yeah, you do see that through the bars. You do see people sharing their feelings. I feel like it's less so in letters because those are so often read by guards. But if you're if you can do phone calls or visits with people, then I think that comes through a little more, and you're able to convey, maybe it's the, the voices or face-to-face meeting that's able to convey that humanity and that level of like compassion and empathy. But like Sara said, it's not, this isn't like charity work we're doing. We're trying to build relationships and build up our movements in the process of doing that. So I think bringing political prisoners or social prisoners, anyone that's locked up behind bars, bringing them into our lives and into our everyday realities in whatever way in whatever way that is, whether it's writing a letter to someone, whether it's, celebrating someone's release and having them perform your wedding, as Eric did, luckily for us this summer. Whatever way you can find to bring these people into your lives and into our movements is going to help everyone.
I had a really hard time feeling safe to write people up, because a lot of times when I was inside, it was always like there was bad things happening. Josh, our entire relationship was me being abused constantly. Not once were we able to talk on the phone or visit for the entire time I knew you until I was out. And so that made it hard. But so like you were able to make me feel safe enough, and like especially because like you ended up befriending Rochelle. You took it beyond just me and recognized that support can also be family. It can be not just the prisoner, but the things that mean something to the prisoner. So is that a normal thing? Like when you're doing support and you're close with someone, do you think about supporting their families too? Or is that like on requesting or just a random thing? Like how do you feel, or how do you interact with the people you support, families or kids or things like that? I'm not asking the question right, but I know you know what I'm talking about.
No, and it's an important question. And for me, I think that like I said, we're fighting for a better world. We're fighting to make our movement stronger. So it's not a matter of like supporting one person. It's not an individual campaign. It's a matter of supporting people in need and fighting state repression. So that means supporting people in prison and also supporting their loved ones and people that are trying to help them on the outside in whatever way that could be. Sometimes, like you mentioned, Rochelle, sometimes I would send Rochelle birthday presents and say it was from Eric. And, just a small little thing like that can really make someone's day. Or just a card here or there, something like that. It's small acts of kindness that can help tear down these walls,
I think we still have a Christmas card you sent Rochelle like from me. It's so thoughtful. What about you, Sara? Were you ever able to develop relationships or support for some of the people you support as families?
It really depends on the person themselves, the relationship they have or don't have with their family, and sort of what they needed. There were definitely some over the years that I developed a relationship with, partially because we could share updates with each other, like here's news that we got, or like, maybe we got news or they got news, whatever it was, to make sure that we were all like on the same loop. We're all working on parole campaigns together. You need the family statements and the friend statements and all those things, and like to organize together. And so I had some opportunities for sure to work with different families over the years. It's definitely like so hard, excuse me, on the families and the close friends of people that are inside. And so anything you can do to help them feel empowered, that they can be part of the solidarity if they want to as well, that they have supporters that are thinking of them, so that they can take whatever actions that they want to as well. But I think it's such an important point. I would ask you a question, Eric, just like you talked a little bit about some of the stuff that Josh did for you. In terms of the Rattling the Cages, the book, as a contributor on the inside, sort of the flip side of the question that you asked us, what was that experience like? Like, are there things that you learned from it that you would take into other projects, like things that really worked well or things that like were frustrating, other than not being able to communicate very effectively, like for all that time?
Man, you turned it on me. So parts of the book really hurt me because I was unable to do as much as I wish I could. I was under such restrictions that like I couldn't talk to Josh the way I wanted to. And sometimes I'd be able to smuggle letters out to him, and he'd be able to mail me chapters and we'd go over them and ask questions together. But like there was times where I felt like I was abandoning my friend, like I was giving him a job instead of a project, and it hurt me because it almost felt like I was exploiting him. I don't know if I ever told you that, Josh. But so like the fact that he kept it going when I got put down, and he stayed in touch with Rochelle. We were able to go back and forth like that. It hit me on a really deep level. And then when I read the book, I think I wept almost every chapter. Like you read Donna's, you read Linda's, you read Laura's, Susan's, Rebecca Rubin's. The book made me like become friends with Jake basically. So like it taught me that I wasn't alone, and it taught me that like the people that came before me and along beside me are such beautiful people. Like this isn't an accident that these people chose action as a cause to devote their lives to, because their hearts are so big. They couldn't contain all that passion. They couldn't contain all that love for the world. They had to act. And so, yeah, I just felt it went beyond my expectations also. It was supposed to be zines, and then it was going to be like a little punk ass video series, which now is a really great video series. And that like Rochelle contributed, Danielle contributed, like people like you helped. And at the same time, I just want to point out, like, there were people in our movement, elder people, that were treating me and Rochelle like shit, that were discouraging it. That were saying, don't do it. It's stupid. Don't waste your time. That were telling Rochelle like she didn't have a role to play. So having people like Josh and Olive and Brian actually want to work to build something together, that was probably the first time I ever felt a part of a movement. And through that, I was able to develop relationships with the people I admired most in the world. The people I mentioned, people like David and Herman and all these guys and Ray. So yeah, the book is a blessing. I love it to death. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life, besides my wife and kids, but mostly just my wife. So yeah. Now back on the questions. I want to talk about, you've both been doing this a while. Josh for a couple months, Sara for over a decade. So I would like to know, how has things changed? How have things developed with email, with letter restrictions, with access to maybe video calls or phone calls? Like, what has changed in the decades that you've been supporting people?
I mean, technology is an important tool. And even in the early days, like you should see the god awful looking websites I was designing like in 2002, you know, like to try and get this information out. Email so that I could reach people, like support crews around the world, other ABCs, other groups that were doing cool work. And, you know, just like that ability to spread the word about these cases and get the writings out and get the art out. Like technology was always a piece of it for me. What we can't assume is that everybody has access to it. And that's like in prison or not. Not everybody has access to technology or is comfortable with it. And so that I think it encourages us to find ways to bring those voices into our offline spaces as well. You know, one of the things that I always say is that like you don't have to like just have prisoner work as like its own separate thing. If you're having a demo about like an environmental issue or a labor issue in your city, there are political prisoners and other prisoners that will give you a statement to read that will be so powerful to that group of people that is gathering. Really inspirational. We've done this a few times, and like, you know, running down the walls is a good example of that, when you get people together and hear these like powerful prisoner statements. I think that there are ways to kind of bridge that technology gap, and, you know, or maybe visit with their families, visit with them, just keep that snail mail going, all those things. In terms of like other changes, I guess, this is going to sound weird, and especially because I am, as long as I've been in it since like, you know, 25 years or whatever, I'm still not somebody who's been in the movement for a long time. We have so many elders, more elder than me,
Yes.
who have so much experience and like so much expertise and just like so much to offer. But in the time that I was coming up as an activist, prisoner support and political prisoner support was more popular. That sounds weird, maybe that sounds weird, but it was
No,
very
it doesn't.
strange.
It
It's
does
very
not.
strange to be strange to be an activist that like didn't know these names that we're talking about today. That didn't like think of like prisoner support as part of the work that like they were doing, even if they were involved in like immigration issues or environmental issues or whatever else. Like they like there was this thread running through it. Maybe there was a little bit of like machismo and bravado in it that made it appealing to people as like young anarchists too. There's a lot of different reasons probably. But I see young activists who are going in now and they've got like, I think solid support, which is so important, so essential. We know that from doing years of prisoner support, how important it is to like keep them supported. I don't know if I see, you know, people that will mention like Bill Dunn's name or like Zen Atchley or like some of these like longer held prisoners who are also very much part of our movements. So I don't like, without just sounding like get off my lawn, things are different now. I feel like it's on us a little bit to like figure out what's happening and like how we can make those connections, bridge that gap. Because to me, it's like, it's not really like a hot issue to like get involved in. And yeah, that does really sound like old person ranting, but
One of the things that like encouraged me to like want to push this forward was I was writing people and they didn't know who Oso was. Oh, I guess kind of Josh on one. They or like I'd write people and they wouldn't know who Sundiata was.
Mm.
Or Bill. And I was like, what the fuck are we even doing? Like if you're writing me, you're missing the boat here. Because there's people that have already been here that are mountains of men and women, like giants of people that need love and support. And so that I think that's real. And I don't know why that's happened. I don't know why like newer people to the abolition game lose sight of the people that have been in longest. And then there's people like Josh. Like Josh has hit me to a lot of people. Josh taught me who JoJo was. Josh taught me who Kojo was. Because he keeps those names alive. He keeps them alive in his heart. And so I guess yeah, we need that. We need people like you and people like Josh to not let our elders like become ghosts basically.
Yeah, I think that's interesting what Sarah said too. Like, you know, I guess a lot of people see the movements different, you know, see them as individual movements here and there fighting for, you know, individual causes, but I see it differently. And I think a lot of people do. And that's one thing that I love about Rattling the Cages is that it, you know, it's got such a wide variety of people, whether it's people like non-violent Catholic protesters or people who shot cops. Like they're all in there.
Shout out to everyone who shot cops.
They're all in there, and there's this thread of resistance that connects every single one of them, and that connects all of us on the outside with our movements. So I think that, you know, seeing that thread and making those connections is really important, and hopefully the calendar Rattling the Cages can be a part of doing that.
Question, Sarah, and this is on the same topic we're having. Josh, you can answer next as well, please. Something I noticed is like I don't want to call it sectarianism in the movements, but I've noticed that like certain people would only write to a water protector, only write to animal rights dude, only write to this or that, and ignore everyone else. Is that something that you noticed when you were first coming up or anytime? Or is that just something that like I'm fabricating in my mind?
Yeah. I think that, I mean, people do gravitate towards certain people that like, you know, they have that affinity with like the cause that they're in for or whatever. There's also like the names, you know, like at the time, there were some like more well-known cases like Peltier, like Mumia, you know, like that were getting a lot of attention. And like, you know, unfortunately, even with all that public support behind them, like are still inside. And so one of the things that I've always tried to encourage people if they're getting involved is like if I can think of people that are like a little bit lesser known or that we think are getting fewer letters, you know, I'll often suggest just thinking about writing to somebody different, you know. It really depends though. I think, you know, I probably started writing out to prisoners that I thought were more like me, or more like into the kind of you know, it was the anti-globalization sort of movement and everything that was happening at that time. And so I think there's nothing wrong with starting there, but to broaden it, you know, I learned so much from prisoners that are like very different from me in terms of their life experiences and in terms of their movements, right? So it's, I think, probably been like the best thing that could happen.
Josh?
What was the question again?
The question was about if you've seen like in modern prison support, like because you started writing prisoners about 2 weeks ago. If you've noticed any like sectarianism where people will focus on writing one specific person for one action, but then not show broader support. And they'll leave it at this like one specific thing. Have you noticed that? Or am I just a baby?
No, I don't. I don't think I've noticed it to the level you're talking about. I do think that people, like Sarah said, they'll gravitate towards movements or people that they feel familiar with, whether that's Earth liberation or animal liberation or anti-fascism. But I can't think of like a single person that I know that like won't write to someone else because they weren't involved in that.
Because you only
Like
know great people.
Well, I mean, I do know people that wouldn't spend their time writing non-political prisoners that feel like, time
This
is
is
very,
it.
yeah, like time, you only have so much time in a day. So these, certain people might think like I will commit whatever time I have to people who are inside fighting for our movements or, fighting back against the government. So I think I wouldn't call that sectarianism either, but I do see that divide where people will, in anarchist circles where people will only want to commit their time to writing to political prisoners.
Yeah, it surprises me sometimes, like to talk to somebody who's like interested in political prisoner support, but like doesn't really consider themselves like an abolitionist, like of prison in general, or like that doesn't like they're not there yet, right? And so those conversations can be pretty interesting, and I think you can, from writing to prisoners outside that list, like again, learn so much and stretch your sort of understanding of the world, and just like I think challenge yourself to see like somebody else's reality, even if it's not like the convenient one for you. There's certainly like you don't have to write to every single person. You can't, but like to try and something like a bit new, I think is something that I would love to see people like do more.
I think that was great advice for life. Challenge yourself to think outside of your realm and maybe show some goddamn empathy to someone else. We just got a couple questions left. I'm thankful that we're able to run a little late. I do get paid overtime for every minute we go over, so I'm okay with it. I am someone who has seen the benefit of prisoner support in life-saving ways. I met my wife through prisoner support. I met Josh through prisoner support. Rattling the Cages came from prisoner support. Sara, you are in my life because of prisoner support. And I've also seen it to where, how do I phrase this? I've got a friend inside named Smiles, and anyone who knows me at all has heard me either talk about or post about Smiles because of the impact he had on my life, keeping me safe. And the first person to write him on behalf of me was Josh. And currently, when Smiles is in trouble, when he's having problems with prison, it is the only way I find out about it and can help him is because Josh went out of his way to write him. So Josh not only helped save my life, but now he's saving Smiles' life. And I think that is something that maybe people don't realize that can happen through prison support. The impact that someone like Sara, someone like Josh can have, not just on one person, but on, because Josh didn't just save me, he also saved Rochelle and my kids. And he's not just saving Smiles, he's saving his sisters, his friends, his dad. There's a tree, there's a legacy of life-saving love that comes from prisoner support. And so I guess like, besides just hyping you and Josh up, the question I want to ask is like, how would you encourage people to take these steps to go beyond letters? Because letters are great, but you two both emphasize doing more. You've both been a part of broad projects that has affected countless people. So what would you say to encourage people to maybe go just to take it a little further, to go into like that deeper, tangible support that can really have an impact? Josh, you go ahead and start. Or Sara, if you're ready. I was giving you time.
I'll dive in. Okay, so I think, it starts with the letters, right? That's how you're building the relationship. And I think that, like, again, we don't want to be doing projects on behalf of people. We want to do it with them, and like not just with their like consent, but like their excitement, hopefully, about what we're working on together. And so I think like that's how you build a relationship. But then to find somebody that has something in common in terms of how they want to do a project. So that might be like a piece of writing, it might be a piece of art or music, or, there's lots of different ways I think that you can explore depending on how much contact you have with them. Or they might want to develop like a web presence for themselves, so that they can get the word out about their cases and things like that. Like I think you think about the skills that you have that you can offer, the resources that you have, or the things that you might want to learn by doing it. Think about what they like need and are interested in, and then sort of try and find that, that spark that gets you excited about it. I can think about you guys talking about this project, like how exciting it must have been to be like, yeah, like this is something that we want to do together, and that's what you want to be able to find. The same as if you're having a conversation with somebody on the outside that you want to have a project with, right? You can float some ideas and just see kind of what sticks. I think like, there's so many resources in the community, from like libraries to schools to, whatever photocopying you can do at your work or whatever. So, I think to like sort of like take a little bit of stock of what resources you have and what skills you have and what you're excited to do, and start sharing. Like if you're building a relationship with a prisoner, start sharing that. Say, these are the types of things, I'm really interested in, podcasts or whatever it is. That's like a pretty cool way to start the conversation.
Awesome. Josh.
Yeah, I would just say that finding that common ground, finding something that you're passionate about and that you're either interested in or good at doing, and that the incarcerated person is also interested in, like finding, whether it's artwork or books or music. Like there's working with Oso Blanco, we're able to highlight this really beautiful art, and I'll just show it one more time because it is so beautiful.
Melody, if you're watching, this is all things that you see.
But he has supporters who also make music with him, who like call in with him and create music over prison phones, and he's written 2 books with other people who support him. And there's hundreds of people in prison who have different ways that they need support. So finding that, whatever it may be, whether it's printing something. Danielle and I have become so close with people inside who needed help with degrees that they were working on. Like think about working on a degree inside and not having access to the internet.
I can think of that.
Yeah, and it's horrible. Yeah, so
Horrible.
we're able to like help print stuff out and like help people with getting degrees, with educating themselves, with bettering themselves. Whatever we can do in that capacity, I think is worthwhile.
I would like to point out there was I've been lifted up by so many people. Examples of what we're talking about. I've got a comrade named Marissa, and they were the 3rd person ever to write me 10 years ago or 11 years, whenever. And when I got out, they introduced me to their friends at Broken Record Radio Hour, where I could go on this radio show and just have an hour to talk about prison. And now I've developed a relationship with those people. And it all happened because Marissa cared enough. I was able to go talk in Seattle, Washington, because our homie Lawson cared enough to have us out there, me and Josh. There's been these things where if you care enough and you have the ability, because not everyone has the ability, but if you have the ability and you can help someone or develop these outside supports, like it is, I could cry talking about you two or even talking to you two, because my life has been impacted by not only you, but like people like you. I've seen firsthand the immense, I don't want to say fucking impact again, I just said it, but impact you've had on people's lives. 25 years, 4.5 weeks. It's a big deal. So I hope you two both know that like what you do is not just support people, it's change lives. It's make lives better, it's keep people alive. And if I could give you both hugs right now, I would. So I just really love both of you so much.
I just want to say that I think it's also like it makes me a better person, like writing to people inside and
well, because you start off a bad person. There's only one way to go.
But he's right. He's right in so many ways. Like, this is why we have to let people know that they're not forgotten when they go inside, that we're out here for them. Because it keeps our movements strong and because we get so much from that relationship together, they're not forgotten and we are building these connections no matter what barriers are in front of us, right? And that makes us feel safer as activists too, I think. It makes us feel like more like connected. And again, we learn from each other so much. I get so much out of these relationships. But I think like you feeling supported and protected makes us feel supported and protected in the work that we're doing too. Like it's a scary space to be in and to be like, we're going to stand up and do this.
Something I think that people maybe that don't participate in abolitionist work don't understand is that it's not a one-sided thing. It's not like you said, you both said kind of, this isn't goddamn charity work. Like your lives are getting enriched also. These are relationships and they're beneficial in 1,000 ways, even though they're behind bars. We're going to close out here soon. I wanted to give each of you a chance to talk about, I don't know, projects you're doing now or projects you've done in the past that you just want to emphasize or wrap or just talk about the role that it had or the impact it had on your lives. So Sara, we'll start with you. If there's just anything you want to shout out or give a history rep to, or just say, now would be just a really great time.
Yeah, I mean, so locally here in Canada, there's actually an expansion of prisons, very much American style, like prison expansion project that's underway. It's a wonderful group that's starting to do so, well, has been for a while now, doing some great organizing work to try and contest that, to try and find ways to let people know that it's happening in their communities, how damaging it's going to be, and just like try to find ways to make it not happen. There is a wonderful local group called BAPSOP. I mentioned them before, Barton Prison Solidarity Project. You can find them on Instagram, or if you can't, just find me on Instagram and I'll point you in the direction of these great projects. They are just the most badass organizers. They stand outside the prison with their phone number on a huge banner and wait for people to call them. And that is so powerful because the access to the prisoners, even though they're in the middle of our community, is very limited. This is a brutal condition jail that has they don't turn the heat on until way far into the winter. They ran out of toilet paper for a significant amount of weeks this last year. Just brutal conditions. They're trying to organize the community and they work very closely with the families around this stuff too. So just that shout out to all the awesome work that's happening in Canada, and Prison Radio in Montreal and Kingston and all the cool places. Vancouver, I think, still has one too, just raising the voices. So yeah, thank you.
Tell Prison Radio I said, what's up? Man, I want to fucking get on there.
I'm sure they'll be happy to have you. So we got a connection. Josh and I just did an interview with them a few weeks ago. What? So we got the connect.
Josh did an interview without me?
It does happen rarely, yeah.
Judas. So try to get me on Prison Radio. Josh, shout out some projects, some support things, anything you want to just talk about or just let people know about.
Yeah, so besides getting a certain days calendar, since it's the beginning of the new year, check out Rattling the Cages, check out these rad Oso Blanco greeting cards. And also we've been turning these Rattling the Cages panel talks with Firestorm Books. This is our 10th one. We've been turning them into zines, and I'm sharing a link now. People can download them, print them, send them into people in prison who don't have the opportunity to listen to these. And then just other smaller projects.
Or Ev. Shout out Ev.
Yeah, and shout out to ABC groups that are doing this amazing work, whether it's noise demos or running down the walls, raising awareness and funds for people inside. And I'll just shout out a few political prisoners who have been in for a long time who could use some love. Kumail Siddiqui is one. We had his daughter on the first panel talk, and so reach out.
His daughter too.
Yeah, an amazing family. Also, Jaleel Alamin, formerly H. Brown. He's in prison in the federal system, and he's not getting the medical attention he needs. And then also the Virgin Island 3. There's still 3 guys from the Virgin Island who have been in prison since, I believe, 1973. They're in their upper 70s, some I think in their 80s now. And two of them participated in Rattling the Cages. And in doing so, I told them it was kind of a quid pro quo thing where they wanted their memoirs and poems produced. So I'll be working on that. If anyone wants to help, reach out to the Virgin Island 3 and help share their stories.
If anyone wants a book written, just hit up Josh right away. Doesn't
That's
matter where you're from,
exciting.
what you're doing,
Yeah.
he will write this book.
Josh didn't learn that lesson about capacity and saying no yet, but
Yeah, not yet. I will.
So I end all these by Josh is hung up, I guess.
Oh, he's super mad at that.
Yeah. So I end all these by deeply encouraging people to please write prisoners to please get involved. To all the groups that are still doing it, I usually talk to you guys on Instagram, but every single group repping prisoners, thank you. You're all doing really great stuff. Shout out to Pushing Down the Walls too. Like those dudes out there are really amazing. Please write Randy Platt. Smiles. He is at ADX, the Federal Supermax. He is there for slicing a cop. He saved my life literally on at least 2 occasions and had my back countless other times. And he did that putting his life on the line, going against the Nazis in there and putting a queer-loving anti-fascist first. And that's a dangerous game inside prison. So please write Randy Platt, aka Smiles and ADX. And Liberty, you can go ahead and shut us down. Thank you, everyone. We had a lot of people watching, so thanks to everyone who watched too.
Yeah, thanks
Sarah.
everyone. Thanks Liberty and Firestorm too.
Yeah, thank you all so much. This has been a really good conversation. And also congratulations on the 10th event in this series. You've done an incredible job putting these together. And for anyone who hasn't tuned in for all 10 of them, definitely check out the zines or the YouTube archive because they've all been incredible. So many gems. I hope you all have a great evening.
Bye.
Take care.